Do not close this video yet, because what I'm about to tell you in the next few minutes is going to explain something that has been happening to you for days, something so specific that when I describe it, you are going to feel a chill go down your spine, because you are going to realize I'm talking about you, not people in general. You, the number you keep seeing, the person who randomly messaged you after months of silence, the thought that keeps interrupting your sleep. None of that was random. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it has been happening, and more importantly, what happens if you keep ignoring it. Here is something almost nobody tells you, and it is the most important sentence in this entire video. So listen closely. The signs do not start small and build up gently. They start quiet, almost invisible, and then they escalate, faster and faster, until they become impossible to ignore. If you are noticing more strange coincidences this week than you have in months, that is not a peaceful little nudge anymore. That is an escalation. And escalations do not happen without a reason. Something is building toward a moment, and that moment is closer than you think. Stay with me, because later in this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact stage this escalation is at in your life right now, and it might be further along than you realize. Let us start with the numbers, because this is where almost everyone's story begins, and yet almost nobody understands what is actually happening when it happens to them. You glance at a clock. 11:11. You do not think much of it. The next day, a receipt total ends in the same digits. Then a phone number. Then a page count in a book you randomly picked up. At first, it feels like your imagination. Then it starts to feel like it is following you. Here is the part that will genuinely shock you. Repeating numbers are not the message. They are the doorbell. They exist to make you stop, to make you look up, to make you pay attention, because the actual message that is coming is something your normal, distracted mind would have completely missed if you had not already been trained to notice the small things first. The numbers are not random. They are training you to listen before the real communication even begins. Now here is where it gets stranger. And I promise you, if you keep watching, the next part is going to explain something that has probably confused you for years without you ever realizing it was connected to any of this. Have you ever had a thought about a person completely out of nowhere? Someone you had not thought about in a long time, and within hours, sometimes minutes, that exact person contacts you or you hear their name mentioned by a total stranger. Most people brush this off with a shrug and move on with their day. But think about the odds of that happening by pure chance, over and over again, for the same handful of people your entire life. It is not coincidence. It is not telepathy either, at least not the way movies portray it. It is something closer to being tapped on the shoulder right before a connection was about to be placed in front of you, as if you were being given advance notice that something involving that person was already in motion before it ever reached your side of the story. I need you to stay until the end of this video, because there is a sign coming up later that almost nobody talks about. One so rare and so specific that most people go their entire life without ever realizing it happened to them. And when I describe it, you are very likely going to remember a moment from your own past that you never fully understood until this exact second. But first, we need to talk about why this is happening to you right now, this week, and not some other random time in your life. Because that timing is not an accident either. Here is the part that is going to feel uncomfortable, but I need you to hear it anyway, because comfort has never been the point of any of this. The intensity of the signs in a person's life is almost always tied to the size of what is coming next. Small signs, quiet nudges, those show up during ordinary seasons, gentle course corrections here and there. But when the signs start stacking on top of each other, numbers and people and dreams and songs all within the same handful of days, that kind of intensity is reserved for something much bigger. A door closing forever. A door opening that has been locked for years. A warning about a decision that would have cost you far more than you realize. If what you have been experiencing lately feels loud, relentless, impossible to explain away anymore, that loudness is not random noise. It is proportional. And if it feels that loud to you right now, that alone should tell you something about the size of what is standing on the other side of it. Let me tell you about the sign nobody talks about, the one I promised earlier, because this is where things get genuinely unsettling for most people the first time they hear it described out loud. It is the moment right before something goes wrong, where an inexplicable feeling stops you cold for no logical reason. You were about to walk somewhere, say something, get in a car, sign something, and out of nowhere your entire body tightened, your stomach dropped, and some voice inside you said, "Do not do this. Not yet. Not this way." Most people call it a gut feeling and move on. But think about how many times that gut feeling turned out to be exactly right. Later, after the fact, when you finally understood what you had actually avoided. That feeling has a source. It does not come from nowhere. It comes from something that can see slightly further down the road than you can, warning you a few seconds before you needed the warning most. And if you have ever ignored that feeling and regretted it later, you already know exactly what I'm talking about, because a part of you has never forgotten it. If you are still here, if none of this has felt like background noise to you, I need to tell you something that might be the most important part of this entire video, so do not look away right now. There is a very real chance that everything you have heard so far is not just information. It might be a mirror. Somewhere in the last 30 seconds, a specific memory surfaced in your mind, a moment you had almost forgotten. And it surfaced because it was supposed to. That is not coincidence either. That is the same pattern, reaching you one more time, through a video instead of a stranger or a number, because it has not given up trying to get through to you, no matter how many times you have brushed it off before. Now let us talk about why so many people miss all of this entirely, because understanding the reason is the only way to make sure you are not one of them anymore. It is not because God stopped speaking. It is not because the signs stopped appearing. It is because modern life trained an entire generation to move too fast to notice anything subtle. Notifications, deadlines, noise, distraction, stacked on top of each other from the moment people wake up until the moment they fall asleep exhausted. In that kind of environment, a quiet nudge does not stand a chance. It gets drowned out before it ever reaches the surface of your awareness. This is the uncomfortable truth almost nobody wants to admit. The problem was never distance from the divine. The problem has always been distraction from everything else. And distraction is a much harder enemy to fight than distance, because distraction disguises itself as productivity, as responsibility, as simply being a normal, busy person living a normal, busy life. Here is where the story takes its sharpest turn. So if you have been half listening up until now, this is the moment to actually pay attention, because everything before this was preparation for what I'm about to say. The signs you have been given were never meant to entertain you or make your week feel a little more mysterious. They were meant to move you, and here is the part that will genuinely surprise you. The window for responding to them is not unlimited. Signs that go unanswered long enough do not necessarily repeat forever. Sometimes they get quieter. Sometimes the door that was standing open eventually closes, not out of punishment, but because doors do not stay open forever, waiting for someone who keeps walking past them without ever stepping through. This is not meant to scare you. It is meant to wake you up, because right now, at this exact point in your life, that door is very likely still open. And that is the entire reason this message found you today, instead of a year from now, when it might have been too late to matter. Before we go any further, I need to tell you about something that happens to almost everyone at least once, and yet almost no one connects it to anything spiritual, because it feels too strange, too glitchy, too much like a malfunction to take seriously. Deja vu. That split second where a moment feels like it has already happened, exactly as it is happening, down to the smallest detail. A sentence someone says, the angle of the light, the exact feeling in your chest. Scientists will tell you it is a misfire in the brain, a delay between two hemispheres processing the same information. Maybe that is part of it. But ask yourself why that misfire always seems to happen at moments that later turn out to matter. People rarely report déjà vu during meaningless, forgettable minutes of their day. It shows up during conversations that change something, decisions that shift a direction, meetings that later turn out to be the beginning of something significant. If déjà vu were truly meaningless noise, it would not cluster so consistently around the exact moments your life pivots. That clustering is the part nobody can fully explain away. No matter how clinical the explanation sounds, here's something else that will unsettle you a little, and I want you to really sit with it instead of rushing past it. Have you ever opened a book to a random page or had someone quote a verse or a line to you completely out of context, and it answered a question you had been silently wrestling with for days, sometimes weeks? A question you had never said out loud to a single other person. Think about the odds of that happening by pure chance, not once but multiple times across your life, always landing on exactly the words you needed, at exactly the moment you needed them, from a source that had absolutely no way of knowing what was going on inside your head. Randomness does not consistently aim itself at your exact private struggle, something that specific requires intention. It requires someone who already knew the question before you finished asking it, and who placed the answer somewhere you would stumble onto it at precisely the right hour. I promised you earlier that this video would get more unsettling the longer you stayed. And here is where that promise gets kept. There is a specific kind of dream that people rarely talk about, because when they try to describe it, it sounds almost too strange to say out loud without feeling embarrassed. It is the dream that warns you. Not a nightmare full of chaos and fear, but something quieter and far more precise. A dream that shows you a specific person, a specific situation, a specific outcome, days or even weeks before it plays out in real life, almost exactly the way it appeared while you were sleeping. Most people wake up from a dream like that, feel a chill, mention it to no one, and forget about it until the moment it starts happening in front of them. And suddenly the memory comes flooding back with a force that stops them in their tracks. If this has ever happened to you, even once, you already know there is no comfortable, purely scientific explanation that fully accounts for it. Some part of you has been shown things in advance more than once, and you have spent years pretending you did not notice. Now here's the part that ties every single one of these threads together, and once you hear it, you are not going to be able to unhear it. Numbers, strangers, thoughts about people who then appear, gut feelings that stop you cold, deja vu, verses that answer unspoken questions. Warning dreams. These are not 7 separate, unrelated phenomena that happen to coincide with each other. They are the same signal, delivered through 7 different channels, because a message this important does not rely on a single method that could easily be missed or explained away. It repeats itself in different forms, specifically so that even the most skeptical, distracted, overwhelmed version of you would eventually notice at least one of them. The repetition is not overkill. It is mercy. It is someone refusing to give up on getting through to you, even when you have proven, again and again, how easy you are to distract. I need to pause here and say something directly to you, because if you have made it this far into the video without turning it off, that alone tells me something about where your attention actually wants to be right now, even if the rest of your life has been pulling you in 100 other directions. Ask yourself honestly, right now, in this exact moment, which of the things I have described has already happened to you this week? Not last year, not sometime vague in the past. This week, if even one of them landed with a jolt of recognition, that is not your imagination working overtime. That is your own memory confirming, in real time, everything this video has been building toward. Let me ask you something directly, and I want you to actually answer honestly in your own mind, instead of skimming past this the way you have skimmed past every other sign this past week. What decision have you been avoiding? What conversation have you been putting off? Because you are afraid of what it might cost you. What door have you been standing in front of, hand raised, never quite knocking? Because there is a strong chance that every strange coincidence from the last several days was not random at all. It was the answer to that exact question, delivered in pieces, waiting for you to finally put them together and stop pretending you had not noticed. Stay with me a little longer, because there is one more layer to this that most people never uncover, and it changes everything about how you should think of the last few days of your life. Signs almost never arrive in isolation. They arrive in clusters that form a specific shape once you step back far enough to see them. A number leads to a person leads to a conversation leads to a thought you cannot shake. A thought leads to a decision that changes the direction of everything that follows. If you go back through this past week and lay every strange moment side by side, in order, you are very likely going to see a shape forming, a direction, a single thread running underneath everything you assumed was unconnected. That thread has a destination. It always has. And it has been quietly pulling you toward it this entire time, whether you noticed or not. Here is something that will genuinely shock you if you have never thought about it this way before. Doubt itself is not proof that nothing real is happening. In fact, the moments where doubt gets loudest are very often the moments right before the clearest confirmation arrives, almost as if resistance intensifies right before a breakthrough. The same way a room gets darkest in the seconds right before dawn actually breaks. If you have been doubting everything you have felt lately, wondering if you're imagining all of it, take that as a signal, not a dismissal. The strongest doubt often shows up closest to the strongest truth, because whatever does not want you to notice these signs works hardest right when you are closest to finally understanding them. I want to bring you back to the very beginning of this video for a moment, because now that you have heard everything, it should hit differently than it did the first time. You did not stumble onto this by accident. Something led you here, the same something that has been placing numbers in front of your eyes, sending people back into your life, interrupting your sleep with dreams you cannot explain, and stopping you cold with feelings you could not justify with logic. All of that was preparation for this exact moment. Sitting here, finally hearing it laid out plainly enough that you cannot pretend anymore that it was all just chance. There is one final layer to this, and I saved it for last on purpose. Because it is the piece that most people are the least prepared to hear, even after everything else in this video. It is possible to notice every single sign correctly, to feel every chill, to recognize every pattern, and still do nothing. Because recognizing a message and responding to it are two completely different things, and only one of them actually changes your life. You can spend years collecting signs like souvenirs, telling the story at dinner tables, feeling a little more spiritual, a little more special, while the actual instruction hidden inside every single one of them sits completely untouched. That is the quiet tragedy almost nobody talks about. Not the person who never received a sign. The person who received hundreds of them and still walked past every single door they were pointing toward. Think about your own life for a moment, honestly, without flinching away from it. How many times have you felt this exact feeling before? This exact sense that something was trying to tell you something important, only for the feeling to fade within a day or two, buried under emails and errands and everything else clawing for your attention. If this is not the first time you have felt this way, that should tell you something crucial. The message has been repeating itself for longer than you think. Patiently, without resentment, without giving up, waiting for the one time you finally decide to do something different with it, instead of letting it dissolve back into the noise the way it always has before. Here is something that will genuinely disturb you if you let it sink in fully. Every day that passes without a response is not neutral. It is not simply a pause button where everything stays exactly the way it was while you decide what to do. Life keeps moving. Doors that stood open stay open for a season, not forever. People who were placed in your path at the right moment eventually move on if you never reach toward them. Opportunities that were laid out specifically to intersect with your timing eventually pass to someone else who happened to be paying closer attention. This is not meant to frighten you into panic. It is meant to strip away the illusion that you have unlimited time to eventually get around to listening. You do not. No one does. And the fact that this message reached you today at this exact point is very likely not a coincidence about timing either. I want you to notice something about the way you feel right now, in this exact second, because it matters more than anything I could tell you directly. There is a difference between intellectual curiosity and genuine recognition. Curiosity feels interesting, detached, like learning a fact about someone else's experience. Recognition feels different. It feels like something inside your chest tightening, like a memory surfacing you had not thought about in months, like the uncomfortable sense that this was written specifically about your life and not some general audience. If what you are feeling right now is the second one, not the first, then you already know, somewhere underneath all your logic and skepticism, that this was never really about coincidences at all. It was about you, specifically on this exact day, at this exact hour, hearing exactly what you needed to hear before it was too late to matter. So here's the only question that actually matters now. Not whether any of this is real, because somewhere inside you, you already know it is. The real question is what you're going to do about it in the next 24 hours, because that window is the part almost nobody talks about, and it is the part that decides everything. Are you going to close this video and go right back into the noise, letting this become one more thing you noticed and then quietly forgot, the way you have done with every sign before this one? Or are you finally going to stop, Sit in the silence for 5 uninterrupted minutes and actually listen to what has been trying to reach you for days, maybe even for years, patiently, quietly, refusing to give up on you, no matter how many times you walked right past it. Because here's the truth. This entire video has been building toward the one thing I need you to carry with you after this ends. This was never a coincidence. Not the number, not the person, not the dream, not the feeling that stopped you cold, and not this video either. Every single piece of it was placed exactly where it needed to be, exactly when it needed to arrive. Because someone has been paying far closer attention to your life than you ever gave them credit for, and he is not finished yet. The only question left is whether you are finally ready to stop calling it coincidence and start calling it what it actually is.